Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory, and you're watching the Varietal Literature YouTube page. If you're new here, well, let me tell you what we're doing tonight. We're reading old fairy tales, specifically from two different books tonight. We're going to be reading fairy tales from East of the Sun and West of the Moon, and Old Tales from the North. Now, we've read that one before, that title. Sorry, that specific story from this book before, but we're going to read other stories from this book. And then the other thing that we are reading is a bit more from Mighty Mikko, which is a Finnish fairy tale book, and we're working our way through stories about a little fox who's kind of a jerk. If you've never been here before, or if you're a new person to subscribe, you should know that if you are not watching this live, down in the description box below, there will be timestamps. And those timestamps will take you right to certain stories. So if there's certain things you want to jump to, that's the easiest way to do it. Now, I actually don't know how many stories we're going to read tonight. I technically have about 5 prepared, 3 of which are quite short. Well, I guess 4. One of which is on the longer side. But we're going to read the one that is in the thumbnail first. And that is a story called The Three Princesses of Whiteland. Now, Three Princesses of Whiteland is, a story about fishing, in a sense. And it's our longest story tonight. So this is The Three Princesses of Whiteland, from East of the Sun and West of the Moon, Old Tales from the North. Once on a time there was a fisherman who lived close by a palace and fished for the king's table. One day when he was out fishing, he just caught nothing. Do what he would, however he tried with bait and angle, there was never a sprat on his hook. But when the day was far spent, a head bobbed up out of the water and said, "If I may have what your wife bears under your girdle, you shall catch fish enough." So the man answered boldly, "Yes," for he did not know that his wife was going to have a child. After that, as was like enough, he caught plenty of fish of all kinds, but when he got home at night, he told his story, how he got all that fish, and his wife fell a-weeping, and moaning, and was beside herself for the promise which her husband had made. For she said, "I bear a babe under my girdle." Well, the story soon spread and came up to the castle, and when the king heard the woman's grief and its cause, he sent down to say he would take care of the child to see if he couldn't save it. So the months went on, and when her time came, the fisher's wife had a boy. So the king took it at once and brought it up as his own son, till the lad grew up. Then he begged leave one day to go out fishing with his father. He had such a mind to go, he said. At first the king wouldn't hear of it, but at last the lad had his way and went. And so he and his father were out the whole day, and all went right and well, till they landed at night. Then the lad remembered he'd left his handkerchief, and he went to look for it. But as soon as ever he got into the boat, it began to move off with him at such a speed that the water roared under the bow, and all the lad could do in rowing against it with the oars was of no use. He went and went the whole night, and at last he came to a white strand, far, far away. There he went ashore, and he had walked about a bit. An old man met him, with a long white beard. "What's the name of this land?" asked the lad. "Whiteland," said the man, who went on to ask if the lad whence he came and what he was going to do. So the lad told him all. Yeah, the art in this book, by the way, is stunning. yawning. So nice. Aye, aye, said the man. Now when you have... Oh, the old man, sorry.
Aye, aye. Now when you've walked a little farther along the strand here, you will come to 3 princesses, whom you will see standing in the earth, up to their necks, with only their heads out. Then the first, she is the eldest, will call out and beg you so prettily to come and help her. And the second will do the same, and to neither of these shall you go. Make haste past them, as if you never saw nor heard anything. But the third you shall go to, and do what she asks. If you do this, you'll have good luck, and that's all.
When the lad came to the first princess, she called out to him and begged him so prettily to come to her, but he passed on as though he saw her not, which is the trend, by the way, in fairy tales. Like, if you're the older sister, you're... bye. Ew, you're terrible bad luck. Old. In the same way, he passed by the second, but to the third he went straight up. If you'll do what I bid you, she said, you may have which of us you please. Yes, he was willing enough. So she told him how 3 trolls had set them down in the earth there, all the way up to their necks. But before they had lived in the castle up among the trees. Now, she said, you must go into that castle and let the trolls whip you, each one night for each of us. Each one night for each of us. If you can bear that, you'll set us free. Well, the lad said he was ready to try. When you go in, the princess went on to say, you'll see 2 lions standing at the gate. But if you'll only go right in the middle between them, they'll do you no harm. Then go straight into a little dark room and make your bed. Then the troll will come to whip you. But if you take the flask which hangs on the wall and rub yourself with the ointment that's in it, whenever his lash falls, you'll be as sound as ever. Then grasp the sword that hangs by the side of the flask and strike the troll dead. Yes, he did as the princess told him. He passed in the midst between the lions as if he hadn't seen them, and went straight into the little room. And there he lay down to sleep. First night there came a troll with 3 heads and 3 rods or whips. And he whipped the lad soundly, but he stood it till the troll was done. Then he took the flask and rubbed himself, and grasped the sword and slew the troll. I don't know if I would have done it in that order, but that was what she said to do. So when he went out the next morning, the princesses stood up out of the earth to their waists. The next night 'twas the same story over again, only this time the troll had 6 heads. And of course, 6 rods. Because as you know, trolls always have the same amount of whips as they have heads. He whipped him far worse than the first. But when he went out the next morning, the princesses stood out of the earth as far as the knee. And there they are, standing further out of the earth. Again, beautiful art. The third night there came a troll that had 9 heads and 9 rods, and he whipped and flogged the lad so long that he fainted away. Then the troll took him up and dashed him against the wall. But the shock brought down the flask, which fell on the lad and burst and spilled the ointment all over him, and so he became as strong and as sound as ever again. Then he wasn't slow. He grasped the sword and slew the troll. The next morning, when he went out of the castle, the princesses stood before him with all their bodies out of the earth. So he took the youngest for his queen, and lived well and happily with her for some time. At last he began to long to go home for a little to see his parents. His queen did not like this, but at last his heart was so set on it, and he longed so much. There was no holding him back. So she said, "One thing you must promise me. This only to do what your father begs you to do, and not what your mother wishes." And that he promised. Which, as you know, in folk and fairy tales, means that's exactly what he's going to do. Then she gave him a ring, which was of that kind that anyone who wore it might wish 2 wishes. You know, those rings. So he wished himself home, and when he got home his parents could not wonder enough what a grand man their son had become. Now, when he'd been at home some days, his mothers wished him to go up to the palace and show the king what a fine fellow he had come to be. But his father said, "No, don't let him do that. If he does, we shan't have any more joy of him this time." But it was no good. The mother begged and prayed so long that at last he went. And so he got up to the palace. He was far braver, both in clothes and array, than the other king, who didn't quite like this. And at last he said, "All very fine, but here you can see my queen, what like she is, but I can't see yours, that I can't. Do you know, I scarce think she's so good-looking as mine." Just lovely people. "Would to heaven," said the young king, "she were standing right here, then you'd see what she was like." In that instant, there she stood before him, but she was very woeful, and said to him, "Why did you not mind what I told you?" Speaking for the audience there. "And why did you not listen to what your father said? Now I must away home, and as for you, you've had both your wishes." And with that, she knitted a ring among his hair with her name on it, and wished herself home, and was off. Then the young king was cut to the heart, and went day out and day in, thinking how he could get back to his queen. "I'll just try," he thought, "if I can't learn where the Whiteland lies." And so he went out into the world to ask, and so when he had gone a good way, he came to a high hill, and there he met one who was lord over all the beasts of the wood, for they all came home to him when he blew his horn. So the king asked if he knew where Whiteland was. "No, I don't," said he, "but I'll ask my beasts." Then he blew his horn and called them and asked if any of them knew where Whiteland lay. But there was no beast that knew. So the man gave him a pair of snowshoes. Again, absolutely beautiful art. "When you get on these," he said, "you'll come to my brother who lives hundreds of miles off. He is lord of all the birds in the air. Ask him. When you reach his house, just turn the shoes so that the toes point this way, and they'll come home of themselves." So when the king reached the house, he turned the shoes as the lord of the beast had said, and away they went, home of themselves. So he asked again after Whiteland, and the man called all the birds with a blast of his horn, and asked if any of them knew where Whiteland lay, but none of the birds knew. Now long after the rest of the birds came an old eagle, which had been away 10 round years, but he couldn't tell anyone any more than the rest. Well, said the man, "I'll lend you a pair of snowshoes, and when you get them on, they'll carry you to my brother, who lives hundreds of miles off. He's lord of all the fish in the sea,
You'd better ask him. But don't forget to turn the toes of the shoes this way.
The king was full of thanks, got on the shoes, and when he came to the man who was lord over the fish of the sea, he turned the toes round. And so off they went home like the other pair. And after that he asked again after Whiteland. So the man called the pike with a blast, but no fish could tell where it laid. At last he came to an old pike, which they had great work to call home. He was such a way off. So when they asked him, he said, "Know it? I should think I did. I've been a cook there 10 years. And tomorrow I'm going there again. For now the Queen of Whiteland, whose king is away, is going to wed another husband."
"Well," said the man, "as this is so, I'll give you a bit of advice. Hereabouts on a moor."
Oh, it's not the right man.
"Well, as this is so, I'll give you a bit of advice. Hereabout on a moor stands 3 brothers, and here they have stood these 100 years, fighting about a hat, a cloak, and a pair of boots. If any one of these 3 can make themselves invisible and wish themselves anywhere he please,
If anyone has these 3.
you can tell them you wish to try these things, and after that you'll pass judgment between them, whose they shall be."
Yes, the king thanked the man and went and did as he told him.
"What's all this?" he said to the brothers. "Why do you stand here fighting forever in a day? Just let me try these things, and I'll give judgment whose they shall be."
They were willing to do this, but as soon as he got the hat, the cloak, and the boots, he said,
"When we meet next time, I'll tell you my judgment."
and with these words, he wished himself away. He robbed 3 men, let's be clear. He's the protagonist, so we're cool with it. But like if this was said from the perspective of the 3 brothers was a fairy tale, it'd be like a conniving Finn came along and robbed him or something. So as he went up along in the air, he came up with a north wind.
"Whither away?" roared the north wind.
"To Whiteland," said the king, and then he told him all that had befallen him.
"Ah," said the north wind, "you go faster than I, you do. For you can go straight, while I have to puff and blow round every turn and corner. But when you get there, just place yourself on the stairs by the side of the door. And then I'll come storming in, as though I were going to blow down the whole castle. And when the prince who is to have your queen comes out to see the matter, just you take him by the collar and pitch him out the doors. Then I'll look after him and see if I can't carry him off."
More absolutely beautiful art. Well, the king did as the north wind said. He took his stand on the stairs, and when the north wind came storming and roaring and took hold of the castle wall so that it shook again, the prince came out to see what was the matter. But as soon as ever he came, the king caught him by the collar and pitched him out the doors, and then the north wind caught him up, carried him off. So there was an end of him who did absolutely nothing wrong, from what I can tell. And the king went into the castle, and at first his queen did not know him, and was so as he was so wan and thin, through wandering so far and being so woeful. Yeah, several 100 miles apparently of hiking. But when he shewed her the ring, she was as glad could be. And so the rightful wedding was held, and the fame of it spread far and wide. stumbly talker today. My apologies. Anyways, the end. The thing that stood out for me about that tale as I was reading it earlier in the day was how many, like, there's this thing in fairy tales where like everything kind of comes in sequences of 3, right? And how many times it occurs, and sometimes it just doesn't even go anywhere. It's just a sequence of 3 things. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this. This is like 5 or 6 fairy tales worth of stuff. But it's sort of said in this very summary way. It also feels heavily symbolic, and I'm not too sure, like, what that symbolism is, but it sure has a symbolic feel. I mean, the multi-headed troll, the fact that the toughest troll has 9 heads, I believe has some significance in the Bible. So that's surely a point to be made. Oh, what am I doing? All right. This second tale is also from East of the Sun and West of the Moon, Old Tales from the North, and it's called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind. Actually, I should have a drink of water, so I will redo that in a second. The North Wind voice is a bit of a strain, so you want to have a wet throat. GS says, yes, it was packed full of symbolism. Possibly one of the most you've read. Yeah, I'd say so. I would agree with that. It was almost borderline not a story if it wasn't symbolic. Like, it was that heavily symbolic. GS also says, like your music tonight. Thank you. Okay, so this is called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind, from the book East of the Sun and West of the Moon, Old Tales from the North. Once on a time, there was an old widow who had one son, and as she was poorly and weak, her son had to go up into the safe to fetch meal for cooking, like oatmeal, like some sort of grain meal. When he got outside the safe, he was just going down the steps, and there came the north wind, puffing and blowing. It caught up the meal, and so away with it through the air, it blew it away. Then the lad went back into the safe for more, but when he came out again, the north wind, if the north wind didn't come again and carry his meal off with a puff. And more than that, he did so the 3rd time, and this time the lad got very angry. And so he thought hard that the north wind should behave so. He thought he'd just look him up and ask him to give up his meal. So off he went, but the way was long, and he walked and walked, but at last he came to the north wind's house. "Good day," said the lad, "and thank you for coming to see us yesterday." "Good day," answered the north wind, for his voice was loud and gruff, "and thank you for coming to see me. What do you want?" "Oh," answered the lad, "I only wish to ask you to be so good as to let me have back that meal you took from me on the safe steps. For we haven't much to live on, and if you're going to go on snapping up the morsel we have, there'll be nothing for it but to starve." "I haven't got your meal," said the north wind, "but if you are in need,
I'll give you a cloth, which will give you everything you want. If you only say, 'Cloth, spread yourself, and serve up all kinds of good dishes.'"
With this, the lad was well content, but as the way was so long he couldn't get home in one day, so he turned into an inn on the way. And when they were going to sit down to supper, he laid the cloth on a table which stood in the corner and said, "Cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes." He had scarce said so before the cloth did as it was bid, and all who stood by thought it a fine thing, but most of all the landlady. So when all were fast asleep at dead of night, she took the lad's cloth and put another in its stead, just like the one he'd gotten from the north wind, but which couldn't so much as serve up a bit of dry bread. So when the lad woke, he took his cloth and went off with it, and that day he got home to his mother. "Now," said he, "I've been away to the North Wind's house, and a good fellow he is, for he gave me this cloth, and when I only say to it, 'Cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes,' I get any sort of food I please."
"All very true, I dare say," said his mother, "but seeing is believing, and I shan't believe it till I see it."
So the lad made haste, drew out a table, and laid the cloth on it, and said, "Cloth, spread yourself, and serve up all kinds of good dishes." But never a bit of dry bread did the cloth serve up. "Well," said the lad, "there's no help for it, but to go to the North Wind again," and away he went. So he came to where the North Wind lived, late in the afternoon. "Good evening," said the lad. "Good evening," said the North Wind. "I want my rights for that meal of ours which you took," said the lad, "for as for that cloth I got, it wasn't worth a penny." "I've got no meal," said the North Wind, "but yonder you have a ram, which makes coins nothing but gold ducats. As soon as you say to it, 'Ram, ram, make money.'" So the lad thought this a fine thing. But as it was too far to get home that day, he turned in for the night, to the same inn where he'd slept before. Before he called for anything, he tried the truth of what the North Wind had said of the ram and found it all right. But when the landlord saw that, he thought it was a famous ram. And when the lad had fallen asleep, he took another, which couldn't coin gold ducats, and changed the two. Next morning, off went the lad. And when he got home to his mother, he said, "After all, the North Wind is a jolly good fellow. For now he has given me a ram which can coin golden ducats if I only say, 'Ram, ram, make me money.'" "All very true, I dare say," said his mother, "but I shan't believe any such stuff until I see the ducats made." "Ram, ram, make money," said the lad, but if the ram made anything, it wasn't money. So the lad went back again to the North Wind and blew him up, said the ram was worth nothing, and he must have his rights for the meal. "Well," said the North Wind, "I've nothing else to give you but that old stick in the corner yonder. But it's a stick of that kind that if you say, 'Stick, stick, lay on,' which means beat up, by the way, it lays on till you say, 'Stick, stick, now stop.'" So as the way was long, the lad turned in this night to the landlord. But as he could pretty well guess how things stood as to the cloth and the ram, he lay down at once on the bench and began to snore as if he were asleep. Now, I found that paragraph a bit confusing, so just to clarify, what they mean is he's put together the landlord probably took it, his stuff. Now, the landlord, who easily saw the stick must be worth something, hunted up one which was like it, And when he heard the lad snore, he was going to change the two. But as the landlord was about to take it, the lad bawled out, "Stick, stick, lay on!" And so the stick began to beat the landlord till he jumped over chairs and tables and benches and yelled and roared, "Oh my, oh my! Bid the stick be still, else it will beat me to death, and you shall have both back your cloth and your ram." When the lad thought the landlord had got enough, he said, "Stick, stick, now stop." Then he took the cloth, put it into his pocket. He went home with his stick in his hand, leading the ram by a cord round its horns. And so he got his rights for the meal he had lost. What's the moral of that? Use magic to fix famine. I don't know. I don't think it has one. Don't trust landlords. It's a moral I can get behind. All right. Well, that ate up more time than I thought we would. So that means we're going to switch over to Mighty Miko. GS says, happy ending. Yeah, it's a rare thing in these days. So if you've missed it, for the last couple of weeks, we've been making our way through a, remind myself now, 16-part adventure or epic with Mikko the Fox. So if you wanted to, you don't really have to watch every episode or adventure to catch up to them all. But if you want to, the last 2 episodes of Fireside Fairytales, the ones last week was the horny Finnish woman fairy tale one, and I think the one prior to that was actually called Mikko the Fox. You can hear the first 6 parts. They're very short. Parts is generous. They're like a couple of pages each. And get a sense of who Mikko the Fox is. But let me tell you just offhand, if you're watching now and you didn't catch any of that, Mikko the Fox is kind of a psychopath. And he is this, he's a fox. And foxes are constantly looking for food. And that's the basic premise of the character. He swindles other creatures and farmers and stuff out of food and finds every way he can to do no work but to take food. He has a friend who's a wolf named Pekka, who's a bit dumb. And then he has less of a friend, but kind of a friend, which is a bear called Osmo. And he has recently taken on a servant that's a cat named Muri, who was kicked out by their family, and he's been outsmarted by a crow and killed 2 children of a magpie. Just in case. Oddly enough, the first 2 stories here actually have nothing to do with Mikko, really. They're about Pekka the Fox, or Pekka the Wolf, rather. But anyways, this is Adventure 7 in our ongoing series of Mikko the Fox, from the book Mighty Miko, Book of Finnish Fairy Tales and Folk Tales. Oddly enough, the title of the book does not refer to this fox. There's another Mighty Miko. This is Adventure 7, called The Wolf Sings. Having sacrificed his ox in order to feast the fox's servant, the wolf had nothing left for himself and was soon very hungry. He could find nothing to eat in the forest, so he went prowling around a farm in hopes of getting a pig or a chicken. The only living creature he came upon was a thin old dog asleep in the sun. "This is better than nothing," he thought to himself, and taking hold of the dog, he began dragging it off. "Cousin, cousin," cried the dog, "is this any way to treat a relation? Let me go." "I'm sorry," said the wolf, "but I can't let you go. I'm too hungry." "Let me go," the dog begged, "and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a bottle of vodka." "Promises come easy," said the wolf. "Where will you get the vodka?" Under the bench in the kitchen. That's where the master keeps his bottle. I've seen him hide it there." Come tonight after the family's asleep and I'll let you in and give you the vodka. Now, Pekka the wolf was very fond of vodka, so he said to the dog,
Very well. I'll let you go, but see that you keep your promises.
Late that night when the family were asleep, the wolf came scratching at the farmhouse door, and the dog let him in.
Well, old fellow, you know why I've come.
At once the dog crawled under the bench and got the master's bottle of vodka. Here, Pekka, here it is, he said, offering the wolf the bottle. I don't know if I'd want to be around a drunk wolf.
You drink first,
Pekka insisted.
You're the host.
So the dog raised the bottle and took a little sip. Then the wolf took a deep swallow.
Ah, he said, smacking his lips. That's something like.
His stomach was empty, and the vodka therefore went through his veins like fire. He felt happy and laughed and went capering about the room.
I feel like singing,
he cried. Why, dear Pekka, the dog said, I beg you don't sing. You'll awake the folks. Sit down quietly and we'll talk. So they sat a while and talked, and then the wolf took another deep swallow of the vodka, and again he wanted to sing, and the dog had trouble in restraining him. Do you want to wake the family, Pekka? Be quiet now, or you can't have any more vodka. The wolf took another deep drink, and after that there was no holding him back. He went staggering around the room, howling at the top of his lungs. The farmer and all his family came hurrying into the kitchen with clubs and pokers and whatever they could find. It's a wolf, the farmer cried. The impudent scoundrel coming right into the house. Give him a good beating. And if the door hadn't been open, they would have clubbed poor Pekka to death. As it was, he barely escaped with his life. GS says a wolf has escaped from the Aldergrove Zoo, that's a local zoo in our area, and is currently on the loose, so your story is timely. Well, maybe it'll get into some vodka. It is a little strange to be like a wolf escaped from the zoo when we just have wolves here, so it's not the same as when a wolf normally, or when like creatures normally escape from zoos. It's like a wolf went home is what that story is. Okay, so this next story, the next adventure is Adventure 8 from Mikko the Fox, called The Clever Goat, in the book Mighty Mikko, a book of Finnish fairy tales and folk tales. The truth is, Pekka the wolf was a pretty stupid fellow, always getting into some scrape or other. With some sore ribs and a back aching from the beating which the farm folk had given him, he slunk quietly along the forest ways, hoping to come upon some easy prey. And suddenly he saw ahead of him a goat and a ram.
What are they doing hereabouts? He thought to himself. This is no place for them, and if anything happens to them, it will be their own fault.
VIII, the goat, and Dennis, the ram, both knew that the forest was no place for them, but where else could they go? They had recently been turned loose to fend for themselves by their poor old master, who was no longer able to feed them. This forest rather frightens me, the ram said to the goat. Do you suppose we'll be able to keep off the wolves? VIII, the goat, flirted his whiskers and said, I've got a plan. Thereupon he took a sack and half filled it with dried chips, like a wood. Dead wood, basically. Then when he shook the sack, the chips made a hollow rattle, and he threw the sack over his shoulder and said to the ram, Don't be you frightened. Dinas. We'll be able to hold our own with the forest creatures. And it was just at that moment Pekka, the wolf, appeared.
Ha ha, said Pekka suspiciously. What have you got in that sack? No nonsense now. Answer me or I'll have to kill you both.
Vuhi the goat gave the sack a little rattle. In this sack, he said. Oh, only the skulls and bones of the wolves we have eaten. We haven't had any wolf meat for some time, have we, Dinas? It's good of you to come along, for we're hungry. Attention, Dinas! Kill the wolf! The ram lowered his horns and ready for an attack, and Pekka, the wolf, too surprised to resist and too stiff to run away, cried out wildly, Brothers! Brothers!
Don't kill me.
I'm your friend!
Spare me and I'll do something for you.
Attention, Dinas, the goat commanded. Don't kill the wolf just yet. Then he asked Pekka, What will you do for us if we spare you?
I'll send you 12 wolves, Pekka promised. That will give you more meat than if you just killed me.
12, the goat replied. You are right. 12 wolves will give us more meat than one. Very well, we'll let you go on a condition that you send us 12, but see you keep your word. So the wolf went off as fast as his stiff legs could carry him and assembled 12 of his brothers. Pardon me. I think I need a drink of water.
I've called you together, he said, to warn you of two terrible creatures, a goat and a ram, who are here in the forest eating up wolves. Already they have a sack full of our unfortunate relations' skulls and bones. I saw the sack myself. Don't you think we ought, all of us, to flee?
What? Said the other wolves.
13 wolves turn tail on one goat and one ram? Never. We'll go together and give them battle.
Don't count me in, Pekka said.
I don't want to see those two again.
So the 12 wolves marched off without Pekka. The goat, as he saw them coming, ran up a tree, and the ram followed him, but couldn't get very high. The 12 wolves came under the tree, and standing in close formation, called out,
Now then, you two, come on, we're ready for you.
Attention, Dinas, the goat commanded. They're all here, so lose no more time. Jump down among them and kill them. The goat himself began climbing down the tree, at the same time making an awful noise with his sack. He gave the ram a push, and the ram slipped and fell right on the backs of the wolves. That's right, Dinas. Kill them all. In this children's story, the goat shouted, rattling his sack more furiously than ever, Don't let one of them escape. In the confusion that followed, the wolves stampeded, running helter-skelter in all directions. Every wolf there felt that his own escape was a piece of rare good fortune. Those terrible twos, he thought. Thereafter, Vuhi the goat and Dinas the ram lived on in the forest, untroubled by wolves. Well, So the next two stories I did have planned, but they are a pair. And I don't think I have enough time to do them both. So I think I will call it there. 4 stories, that's good enough. Right? So just a reminder to, whoever it is out there that is watching this and doesn't know, tomorrow, which we normally don't have a show at all, tomorrow night at 6:30 again, we are having the premiere episode of the Big Band Book Club, which there is a video on this channel explaining it. You still have time to get the book, which is Francis Peck's The Broken Places. And we're reading up to chapter 6. So even if you haven't read the book or you only get some way into it, you should come show up anyways, because we will kind of go through chapters in order and sort of discuss stuff like what's a quote we liked, or what's our favorite moment, or what do we think the book's trying to say, what we think the book does well, what was a little tough for us about it, so on and so forth at the book club. And Avalon Born will be there with me, and it's going to be fun. It's actually gotten a fair bit of interest. Francis Peck did actually message me about it, and said, if there's any real pressing questions that I could pass them on to her and she would be happy to answer. Yeah, that's tomorrow, 6:30. Please be here. That'll be fun. I also did I actually did my own art for that. So there's a very unique style to that whole layout and show and the feel of it. It'll be a lot of fun. Come enjoy the best Vancouver authors with myself and Avalon Born. GS says that was pretty hilarious. I think that was one of the most genuinely funny ones. Yeah, I agree with that. And also says, thank you, Rory. Great voices, especially the North Wind and the goat. Well, thank you. The North Wind was wearing. For some reason, I don't know why, because it's really breathy. You think that'd be easier on the throat. But it wasn't. But I had a lot of fun doing them. Thank you to everybody who hung out and listened to stories, and I hope to see you there tomorrow. If you don't make it tomorrow, or if book clubs aren't your thing, come back Thursdays at 6:30, where we'll do Varietal, where we'll actually do the writing together, live writing. GS is looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing it. I will keep the fire going. Thank you very much for coming by, and go to good sleep.